Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for tuning in. So today I decided to do something a little different in honor of Black History Month. So instead of doing my regular book reviews, I thought it would be cool if I shared with you 5 books by Black authors that I really enjoyed. And so hopefully if you haven't read them already, then you can add them to your reading list. So let's get it started. So the first book is going to be fiction, and it is called Ties That Tether by Jane Igaro. It is the story of a girl who moved from Nigeria to Canada when she was 10 years old. So she moves in Toronto with her family at that age, and her family has a lot of expectations from her. So they want her to do well in school, having a great job, which she has done so far. But now that she's 24, 25, there is that conversation about who she's going to marry, right? And they want her to marry someone from her tribe in Nigeria. Of course, things don't happen that way for her because she falls in love with someone who not only is not from her tribe, but is not even Nigerian, not even African. And that creates a lot of family drama because, you know, her family don't want her to do that, right? So we follow the main character as she has to make that choice for herself. So between the cultural expectations and the family expectations versus what she wants and what she feels and what her emotions are. And so at its core, it is a love story. So it's a very sweet book. There's a lot of like swoon moments, and there's also moments that are going to make you laugh because she has a very dramatic mom. But there's a lot of things that made me think about my own life as I was reading it. So I'm not in the situation of the character, and my family is not as like intense when it comes to these things, but I still feel sometimes as a first generation, and not necessarily like in the context of romance, but like I do feel sometimes that I have to choose between following certain cultural norms that comes from the cultural background that I'm from, or should I do what I want and what I feel. And I do know that in the Western world, like it's very centered around us, ourselves, the individual, what we want, what we feel, what we would like to do. But I think those things can be a little complex when you are part of 2 different cultures, just like the main character is. So it was a great, fun, and easy book to read, but I thought that I would share that with you still because I feel like aside from the fun experience that I had, I love that the book made me have a really, really long conversation about those things with someone. So I think it's a great conversation starter, and it's really great for like book clubs as well. So great book. If you do pick it up and you want to talk about it with me, you can always reach out to me because it was fun to have those conversations. Number 2. It is a book called Queenie by Candace Carter Williams. It is the story of a Jamaican British girl, or like British Jamaican. I never really know which one goes first, but Queenie lives in London in the UK, and she is experiencing a very like intense, dramatic, crackhead version of like the quarter life crisis. So just like a lot of people, like after college or like maybe a year or 2 after college, like she finds herself like really lost because there's a lot of things in her life that seem to be falling apart. And as we read along, we see, well, at the beginning, we know that like her boyfriend breaks up with her and things are not going super well for her at work, but then she makes poor decisions after poor decisions until she reaches rock bottom. And then we follow her as she finds the courage to take care of herself and her mental health. So the reason why I really like that book is because I thought it was cool to read a character who is a Black woman in her 20s who doesn't have it all together. And a lot of times, and also deciding to take care of herself. And I love that as she was making those poor decisions, I didn't judge her because I know a lot of the pain that she was experiencing as well. So I didn't judge her. And then when she was picking herself up, I found myself rooting for her. And so it was really cool to read that. And what hit me hard after I read it and I was kind of like digesting everything that I had experienced in that story is that at the end of the day, Queenie is me. So even though like I have never been in some of the situations that she was in, I haven't made those crazy decisions, thank God. But I have been in times in my life where I was vulnerable, where I was not always making the right choices, but I was also super, super hard on myself during those times. And the truth is that I realized that the way that I was showing empathy, that I was feeling empathy towards Queenie, the way that I was rooting for her is the same way that I should be treating myself when I'm experiencing harder times in my life. So that's what I really liked about the book, and that's why I definitely suggest this book to Black girls. I know that not everybody liked that book, like it has sort of mixed reviews, but I think it's still like a really, really relevant book today in today's world. especially as we're having more and more open conversations about mental health. I know that, like, healing and generational trauma are like buzzwords on social media, but the truth is that when you are addressing those issues within yourself, it's not like a linear path, and it's not always looking cute, and there's ups and downs. And so I love that we get to explore that with Queenie. So what I liked about this book, besides the way that it hit me hard, is that it was a very fun book to read. It was definitely a page turner. So I read this like within one day. I mean, to be fair, like we were like on full lockdown here at the time when I read it the first time, but still, it's a really, really easy book. It's very funny. And the way that it flows reminds me a little bit of Insecure, that TV show on HBO. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it kind of reminded me of that. I'm not really sure why, but if like there was like some series to be made from that book, I could definitely see it to be like with the same type of comedy timing that Insecure has. So book number 3 is called Better Not Bitter by Yusef Salam, and he is one of the Exonerated Five. So if you're not familiar with them, in the 90s, a group of 5 teenagers were accused of like a very vicious, violent crime in New York City. And when they went on trial, they were like public enemy number 1. Everybody hated them. The media decided like were casting them as being guilty because like the way that it all happened, like they were just found guilty, but they were actually not guilty. They didn't actually commit those crimes. So they ended up spending time in prison, and after that they get out of prison and they eventually clear their names. And then there has been like some documentaries made about them, including like a series on Netflix that is still like on Netflix right now. It's called When They See Us, directed by Ava DuVernay, sorry. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really good series, but trigger warning, there's a lot of like harsh things in it. But yeah, so Yusef Salam is one of those 5 teenagers. And the reason why I really love that book is because when you watch the series or the documentary, it's very focused on what happened to them, including him. But when you read the book, you really get to know him as a person entirely, right? Because you are not the worst thing that has happened to you. And I feel like that's the main message of the book for me. So we get to know like where he comes from, what his family was like, what he liked to do when he was a teenager up until he got arrested, and then what life was like after he left prison, and how he was able to sustain his faith. It was a very inspiring, uplifting read. And so, of course, there is talk about racial injustice and the fight for racial equality. So there is a lot of that in the book as well. And it's also kind of bittersweet to read that because, when you read about his experiences as a teen, what he was like, what he was into, and then you see how he was arrested, you realize like his childhood and his innocence was cut short like so quick. And by the way, I forgot to mention that I actually got to meet him in person as well, so that's why maybe the book hit me hard as much as it did. But it is a very great book, very inspiring, that I suggest for anybody who is looking for inspiration. Maybe you're experiencing something hard, or you are on a long journey towards a goal and it's taking a lot of time and you don't know really how to have faith in it. It's a very inspiring book from a very like genuine place. So for me, when it comes to self-help books, I'm not really big into the stuff like, be the best you and take care. Like, I really like to read people's stories and draw inspiration from that. So that book really did that for me. So I definitely suggest it. If you want to read it, I'd highly suggest it. It felt like I was drinking a big cup of like positive vibes. So really good book. So book number 4 is called All About Love by Bell Hooks. That book is, Bell Hooks is like a very well-known author, and, she's very respected, talks about feminism and a whole lot of things. But I really like that the book makes you question what love is. So that's really what the book is exploring. What is love and how do you define it and what does it look like? And I like that the book challenges things that you think you know. And I think that it's always important for you to, when it comes to certain concepts, including love, is it really what you believe it is, or is it something that has been like told to you and then you followed that, And so I don't think when you read a book like that, I think it's always good to read it with an open mind, because you're not going to agree with everything that she says. But I do think that it's a very, very good book because you explore a concept that we think we take for granted, speak about myself, that I always took for granted. So I always thought that I know what it's like to be in love. I know what love looks like. I know that love is important. But, when you dig a bit deeper, when you dig as deep as she is digging in the book, you realize that there are things that I thought I knew that I really don't know. So book number 5 is called A Creative Quest by Questlove. You must have seen him at least on TV at some point, if you don't really know him that much. So he is the drummer of a hip hop group named The Roots, and they have been in the music game for a really long time. You must have seen him on talk shows, or maybe at award shows, or maybe like during interviews, because he has like that big afro, which makes him like very more noticeable in that group. And so he's a very multi-talented guy. So he is, of course, a drummer, but he's also like an entrepreneur and a great storyteller. As a fact, he actually won an Oscar, and the Oscar that he won, I believe that this is when Will Smith ended up slapping Chris Rock, so we kind of forgot that he won the Oscar. But yeah, so he's an Oscar winner. What I like about that book is that it felt like a friend was giving you tips on creativity by using anecdotes that are relevant and hilarious, and that is really well written. So I read the hard copy, but there's also like an audiobook that he reads himself, and I heard that it was a really great experience to do the audiobook as well. So if you're into music, I thought it would be cool for you to read that. And he has written, I think, another book that's more about like music history. I haven't read it yet, but with his writing skills, I'm definitely going to read something else from him, because he's a really, really good, sharp storyteller. So that's pretty much it for the books that I wanted to share with you. I thought it would be cool to share 5 books that are very different from one another, because I do think that like the Black experience has so many layers. So that's why I wanted this thing to be a little diverse. So you have people like, authors from Canada, / Nigeria, Jamaica / the UK, the United States. So hopefully you can take something from the books that I have suggested to you. And if you do read them, by all means, you can reach out to me. I always love talking about books. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you for my next video. Bye.